guys, and welcome to the HJW Gaming channel and the start of a brand new series. This series is going to be devoted to breaking down each faction in Lord of the Rings Rise to War, summarising their strengths and their weaknesses so you can either make an informed decision about which faction you want to play, or if you're already playing as them, make sure you're fully playing to their strengths. I really hope you enjoy. So, as I'm sure you already guessed from the title and the thumbnail, the first faction I'm going to be breaking down is Lothlorien. So Lothlorien is a very popular faction for good side players, particularly in later seasons when the Elven Tier 3 commanders are more prevalent. The starting commander given to players who choose Lothlorien in Season 1 is Haldir, who's a strong Tier 1 commander focused on ranged unit damage. He's pretty average at tile taking, as he does not have an immediately available healing skill to reduce his losses. His only heal skill requires ownership of a beast type unit, which are only available from neutral unit camps. However, he is a pretty good PvP commander, with good builds available focusing on both ranged units and the beast tier unit. He also has an excellent Respect 10 unique item, so can be worth investing if you want to further him. He's good without being fully top tier in my opinion. When you first start building up your keep as Lothlorien, you start with the Elven Quarters, which allows the use of Elven units. These units are poor for early game in my opinion, as the beginner units are all ranged units that have high damage but very poor HP and defense. Melee units to shield these ranged units are not unlocked until the third tier of the Elven Quarters, so most early tiling is done without a melee unit. Once unlocked, the Warden melee unit also has pretty poor HP and defense when compared to other melee units, though they are definitely better than the range units you had previously. This lack of defense and HP can really harm your early tile progression, as you're almost fully reliant on either having an evasion commander like Gandalf or Gil-galad, or having excellent gear to buff the unit's defense to make them usable and reduce losses. To make matters worse, the Elven units also have extremely poor siege, which can slow down the faction's early progression. The second set of units you unlock as Lothlorien are the Rohirrim men, which doesn't aid the issue of poor melee units, as these mounted units are very expensive, so will use up a large number of resources if you decide to use these instead of Wardens. The third quarters unlocked are the Númenórean men, then concluded by the Dwarven quarters. This progression almost completely forces you to run commanders that suit Elven units, or universal commanders that can kind of run any unit. If you don't have some of these in the bank, such as Haldir, Gil-galad or Gandalf, it's definitely recommended not to pick Lothlorien, as it likely will not suit your commanders. The other issue with unlocking the dwarf units last is that you're forced to use very poor siege units until mid to late game, which can make progression for your faction into capturing neutral keeps difficult, as the Elven units have extremely poor siege when compared to the Dwarven units. The unique unit, however, available to Lothlorien does make up for this. The March Warden is one of, if not the best, Tier 4 unique faction unit in the game. They provide excellent damage output, with higher damage than the Sentinel per command, and also possess more HP and defense, as well as very good speed. Their skills, however, really take them to the next level. You get stun immunity, you get buffs to their defense, and the chance to gain pursuit, which makes them absolutely lethal. The pursuit in particular is extremely useful in latter seasons, where commanders that use evasion are very, very prevalent. The unique ring skill available to Lothlorien, Song of Elves, can be unlocked after ring level 30 and reduces the treatment time of your units by 10%. This is an excellent buff, particularly for PvP, where keeping units available as often as possible is essential, but it's also very good at the early game to help make up for that lack of defense and HP and high early game losses of your units that I mentioned earlier. It can also help you save a few gems, particularly if you use speed ups often to recover your units. The location of Lothlorien is one of its biggest weaknesses and also its biggest strength. Located in the north of the map, in early seasons its starting spawn areas are dispersed either side of Tower Enarath and the Misty Mountains, leaving players very spread out. Even in Season 1 and 2, Lothlorien is surrounded by opponents on all sides. To the north is Angmar. Erebor to the east is very close to the Elven King's halls. South is Rohan, just through Celebrant Fields and Fangorn. You have Isengard to the southwest, and finally Arnor to the west. After Season 2, Gundabad is also added to the northern threats, so there's yet another possible enemy right on your borders. In addition, some of these factions, particularly Erebor, Gundabad and Rohan, are very popular factions to be chosen, so will likely be very strong if brought into conflict. After a few weeks of the server, often Variags or Mordor, and potentially Gondor too, will push up from the southeast, so many factions will be in your close vicinity, making early war very hard to avoid for Lothlorien. To add insult to injury, Bruin and Vale, one of the starting regions in Season 1 and 2, is separated by numerous tunnels and the Misty Mountains, so if you're attacked from the west, it will be an entire faction versus maybe a third of your players, with the rest of the faction struggling to join their fellows without going through all of these tunnels. The capital, Caras Galadon, is relatively exposed. There are a few choke points with which to hold enemies, and whilst the northern side is protected by a critical crossing, the east only has a regular crossing. This lack of defensive capability pales in comparison to other capitals such as Erebor or Edoras, and means you have no choke points with which to defend against outnumbering forces. One thing Lothlorien's location does give you, however, is many neutral keeps surrounding your starting areas, so you have many choices for your early expansion. Lothlorien can often carve out a large chunk of the map for themselves early on with very little initial contest, except that provided by potentially Gundabad after Season 3, though they will likely have more to consider, being pressed by both Angmar and Erebor. Lothlorien has the largest number of uncontested territories in their vicinity by far when compared to other factions. Lothlorien's location is also very well placed for trying to take Dol Guldur and seize the ring. Amon Lanc is only a single low power territory away from the capital, Caras Galadon. So by capturing southern Anduin Vale early, you immediately have access to the western side of Amon Lanc. Resource-wise, Lothlorien is very balanced and doesn't suffer from a large deficit of a single type of resource in the same way other factions, such as Rohan or Erebor, do. These balanced resources can be very useful for managing incomes to match what you require as the season progresses without hitting a meaningful deficit. In addition, Lothlorien's border with the neutral regions of Celebrant Fields and Fangorn provides an enormous gold mine for the lumber resource, so access to high power tiles is never an issue. The number of uncontested neutral territories in the close vicinity to Lothlorien also provides vast amount of real estate that other factions can only dream of. Another area where Lothlorien excels is its access to useful and strong neutral units. Within Upper Anduin Vale, Gladden Fields and Carrock are the Eagle Eyries. These units are fast and strong versus melee units and can be used to march at enormous speed. In PvP, they can also be very strong, but be careful as they are countered heavily by ranged units. One thing they absolutely excel at is if you put them on a commander, you can zoom around the map at enormous speed and just bounce your opponents so you can waste their stamina without ever needing to fight. Lothlorien also has access to the Ent tiles, which are available in Celebrant Fields and Fangorn. You can also access Beornings in southern and upper Anduin Vale. These units are fairly weak and are primarily siege units due to their very poor march speeds and lack of damage. For levelling your commanders, Lothlorien is probably the easiest faction to train commanders to a high level early, if you know what you're doing. To easily farm experience, you require tiles which contain multiple enemies that can be defeated with few losses, so you can hit multiple enemies with only one cost of stamina. And Lothlorien has this in abundance. For early game, you have an abundance of crossings and tunnels which contain multiple level 25 armies. Mid game, you have Beorning camps with 2 level 35 armies, and late game you have access to both of the best neutral camps for gaining fast experience. These are the Ents and the Eagles. To farm Ents, you just need to put one type of melee tank at the front so the Ents can hit this and do no damage to your ranged units behind, and then run a large number of tier 2 and tier 3 bow knights to deal the damage to the Ents as they're a large unit. You'll suffer very low losses due to the Ents' lack of damage, but you'll also gain a huge amount of XP as these tiles contain 2 level 50 armies. To farm the Eagles, you just need to run a full ranged build on your commander, as the Eagles are very weak to range damage. You'll suffer more losses than you will on Ent tiles, however the Eagles can also be defeated quicker, so if you're looking for fast XP, you can wipe these out very quickly. For beginner players, Lothlorien in my opinion can be a tough start. The starting units and commanders given are not great when compared to other factions such as Erebor, and the map position means early war is very likely, so you must be a player very good at levelling quickly as possible at the start of the season to take advantage of what Loth has to offer. If you've enjoyed and want to see some more, please drop a like on this video to help me get it out there, and please consider subscribing as I will be releasing a lot more of these videos in the future. And with that, I really hope to see you in the next one.